Talk to Joe on 1850 715 815.
And Joe at RTE. Now, I'm just looking at the reaction we're getting on Twitter, generally favourable, and on text, apart from the mention of the car, but that's life. The man texts in, he's entitled to talk about it. Clifford Slapper has also contacted us. You're based in London, Clifford.
That's right. Hello. Good to speak to you.
How are you?
Yes, very good, thanks, but obviously devastated by this news today.
Because you have an unusual connection to David Bowie as well.
I do. I mean, like so many people, I'm still reading from this news because as a child I grew up with his music and was very influenced by it and became a musician myself, largely because of listening to that early David Bowie music, and especially the early piano by Mike Garson. Became a pianist myself and ended up working with David Bowie, and actually was very honoured to be working closely with him on his last ever television appearance.
Which was in Ricky Gervais's
Extras. Back in 2006, which was when he did the comedy show Extras. And
he played it. It was a big section of the programme. Tell us your connection, Clifford.
Well, I mean, you see him playing the piano in that show, but he was actually miming to my playing. We had a second piano off camera, and he and I had to work very closely for a couple of days to rehearse that and synchronise so that as his hands go down, it's going to be timed with my playing, because it was all filmed live in the end. And it was a fantastic experience. And working with him, I found him to be, they say you shouldn't meet your idols because you might be disappointed, but in this case, it really didn't apply. And he was absolutely charming to work with, a consummate professional, and he was just very intelligent, very bright and witty. He and Ricky Gervais, had a great repartee going on set. Between the two of them, they had the rest of us, really in stitches. He was actually a very funny man as well as everything else.
Because I heard Jerry Leonard earlier on, he was on with Ryan actually talking about David Bowie's love of comedians, and he spoke about Spike Milligan and the Goons and Ricky Gervais and Eddie Izzard, that he really liked having good laughs. And by the way, could David not play the piano himself, or what was the...
He did, and I mean, Jerry's a good friend of mine, incidentally, and the funny thing is that... when we were on set that day, he actually, Ricky Gervais and I played a little joke when David left the room briefly. Ricky said to me, "Come on, let's do one of his old songs together." And when David walked back into the room, we were performing Lady Stardust with me on the piano and Ricky Gervais singing it quite well, I might add. And David was very amused, and he sort of ran over to me at the piano and said, "Well, watch this," and he started playing "Oh You Pretty Things" on the piano as he leant over me, and because that was one of his early songs, which he clearly did play the piano on, and I think had written on the piano, in fact. But generally speaking, no, I mean, his piano was a tool for him to write the songs around sometimes, but more often than not, it was more likely to be guitar. So I'd say his piano playing was okay, but it was pretty fundamental.
Well, that was you. And Clifford, there is... this side of the water anyway, I can't imagine what it's like in London and Brixton and where he's from, but there is a genuine sense of sadness at the untimely passing of a great artist.
Oh, very much so. I mean, in London today, the atmosphere is really quite palpable, and as I say, so many people through more than one generation actually have been really touched by him, really inspired by him. And I mentioned Mike Garson, who's become a good friend as well, and he played the piano on all of Bowie's early albums, going right through Aladdin Sane, going through the 70s. And, I wrote the biography, the first ever biography of Mike Garson, which came out last year. And we were both very pleased to have a sort of endorsement from David for that as well, because, he encouraged us he allowed us, let's say, to advertise that on his website. And in fact, Mike stayed in touch with him right the way through those later years. And they had a great creative sort of understanding and collaboration. That piano, if you listen to the early work of Bowie, you'll hear Mike Garson's piano playing a very key role there. So, I mean, and this is what made me become a musician. So the influence is huge.
Okay, that's Clifford. Thanks indeed for that. That's Clifford Slapper, who contacted us from via Twitter from London. Thanks indeed, Clifford, and condolences.
You're very welcome.
Condolences to everyone who knew David Bowie. I think it's surrounded today with great sadness. BP, that point that Clifford made, this thing. Oh, you should never meet your heroes.
Yes.
That doesn't apply to.
Not in
Dave.
this instance. I think actually when Peter Noon or Herman's Hermits or both or whichever, DB played the piano on actually the Peter Noon record of Oh You Pretty Things.
Oh, did he? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about playing piano. What mustn't be overlooked is that Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, they were just one of the best ever rock and roll bands with Mick Ronson on guitar. Really fantastic band, and the synergy between him and Mick Ronson on stage, as well as on record musically. On stage, visually, it was fantastic, the way they worked it together. And when they came on Top of the Pops doing Starman or whatever it was back in the day, many minds were blown. I think, to use the vernacular, people flipped their wigs, because no one had seen anything quite like this before. And another thing that I don't feel should be forgotten is Mark Bolan in this instance, because Mark Bolan and David were very close friends, and they're also fierce competitors. And after Bowie had the hit record with Space Oddity, which we talked about earlier on, the follow-up record was a song called Prettiest Star, which David had written about Mark, and Mark actually played guitar on it. And it sold about 3 copies, the single. Later on, Bowie recorded it again with Mick Ronson. That was a wonderful record, but really, and I think DB would agree with this, that Mark kind of opened the door for him to come whizzing in sideways.
And BP, can you? I presume you are at this, and I say it's nearly it's just 8 hours since the death of David Bowie was announced. That there is an awful sense of sadness, palpable sadness among not just music lovers, but people who loved art and loved artists, because he was more than a musician, wasn't he? He went to art college, as we know.
Yes, he was. I mean, writing songs by cutting up the words and stuff, that had never been applied to rock and roll before. In other words, you write the song and then you cut it all up and then you pull the bits out at supposed random, but you're guided by the angels if you're lucky. And then you have a song. Yes, there is a feeling of ferocious sadness. I mean, I'm hearing from people that I haven't heard for years. Mm-hmm. People reach out to each other. You see, the thing is this: death is its own pedestal. You can't go any higher.
Yeah. And BP, you mentioned Mott the Hoople earlier on, didn't you?
Yes.
All the young dudes. And you regard that as a class. Bowie wrote that as a class.
I mean, that's arguably the anthem of that time period. It's a wonderful song. It's a tremendous song, and there's a really cool version of him and Mott the Hoople doing it together, actually.